Today we're going to talk about Excel 2010's Ribbon. The Ribbon is the tool in Excel that you use to pretty much gain access to all their commands. For some of you who are new to Excel, you're pretty lucky because you're going to be learning this interface for the first time, and it'll really make a lot of sense, I think. For those of you who are used to Excel 2003 and before and the menus, it'll take a little bit to get used to. The main thing is where things are. But once you do, I think you'll really like it. It's a really rich interface. So the first thing let's look at is, you see the top of the screen, we have what are called the ribbon tabs going across the screen. We have a Home tab, an Insert tab, Page Layout, Formulas, Data, Review, and View. So let's go back to the Home tab. And once you click on a tab, you get its ribbon. And the ribbon contains commands, multiple commands when they have a drop down, other options, drop down boxes for fonts. You'll also see that within each ribbon you have these groupings, and this is a clipboard group, and that pretty much contains commands that relate to things you're going to do with clipboard: cut, copy, and paste. Then you have a font grouping that has bold, italic, underline. You can change the font, the name of the font, alignment, number. The groupings are basically a subcategory of the commands. Everything on this ribbon should pretty much pertain to the Ribbon tab. So in the Home tab, you basically have commands Excel thinks that you're going to use most of the time. If we go over to the Insert ribbon, here you have objects you're going to insert into your worksheet. Starting off with pivot tables and tables, which are good tools to use to manipulate and manage data. Then you have some drawing things, pictures, clip art, shapes. Next, you can insert charts, and this is a little bit faster than the Chart Wizard. From 1 degree, you can actually click right on the column chart or bar chart. It saves us a little step. Then we have spark lines, slicers, again, things you can insert. Page layout is going to have a lot to do with how our worksheet prints. Here's where we'll set our margins, set our page orientation to portrait or landscape. If you go to the Formulas tab, here's where we have a lot of tools to help us deal with formulas when we're making them in our Excel worksheet. Now, half of this ribbon is purely dedicated to the functions of Excel. As many of you know, Excel has hundreds if not thousands of functions to choose for, and so this ribbon makes them a little easier to get to. Instead of going through a wizard and having a couple of clicks, now if I want a date and time function, I just click on it right away, and here's a list of all my functions right here. You also have access to Excel's Name Manager off the ribbon in the Define Names grouping, and some of the formula debugging tools, the tracing precedence and dependence, the watch window, and here's where you also set calculation options to automatic or manual. Next is the Data ribbon, in which we start off with ways to connect and get data from other systems like an Access database, the web, other data sources like a SQL Server, Analysis Services, Microsoft Query. As we go on, we have some other options we might be familiar with. Sort and filter, while they look the same, the sort button looks the same. If I click it, you'll see it's a little bit different, and it's much richer than the older versions of Excel. We'll cover that in a different lesson. Then we have some other data tools, validations, what-if analysis, your goal seek, and scenario manager. Going on to the Review tab, here's where we have things like the spell checker, a thesaurus, where you can add comments to cells. And this one is where you also, on the Review tab, is where you also protect worksheets and workbooks. This doesn't make a lot of sense to me to put it on a Review tab, but again, that's just part of getting used to how the ribbons work. And the last tab we're going to look at is the View tab, and this kind of contains things for how Excel is going to look when we're on it. Grid lines, formula, bar, headings. Here's also where you can go to see macros. Click the macros button and you see where your macros are going to be. So that's it for most of the ribbon tabs. Let's click over to the first one, the File ribbon. Okay, this looks a little different than the ribbon. It operates a little differently too. But here's where you do your file commands, your save as. You can look at your recently used files. One of the things that I've learned about the recently used files is that you have these little push pins. So if you have 50 or 100 files in your recent workbooks list, you can put a push pin in there. That'll move it to the top and it'll kind of keep it at the top. Now, if you push pin 50 things, then you're still going to have that problem. But it's a way you can kind of always keep some recently used files in your recently used workbooks list and keep them at the top. Okay, let's go back to the Home tab. and we're going to talk a little bit more about how the ribbons actually work. It's not too different than toolbars or menus. You click on a command to use it, but some of the other things about the ribbons. Right now I'm working with Excel Maximized. If I take it to a less than full screen view, let's watch this alignment section right here and see what happens as I shrink up Excel. You see it starts shrinking, and eventually we get down to, there you go. Now the alignment section is gone. I don't see any of those things, but the section's actually still there and it has a drop down. I just like to point this out. If you get used to seeing things a certain way, if Excel is not full screen and you see this, all you have to do is click that drop down arrow and get all your alignment commands. Okay, I'm going to go back to maximizing it. Another feature these ribbons have is that some of these groups have a dialog box associated with them, and that's this little icon in the lower right hand corner. Let's look at the font one, because I think most of us will recognize that. If I click that font dialog box, now the format cells in the font dialog box comes up, and a lot of us who are familiar with Excel will recognize this. This is the old font dialog box where I can change my font, change colors, add strike through, some other effects. I'll go ahead and cancel that. Not every grouping has that. The styles group doesn't have that, but a lot of them do have this little flyaway dialog box. Another thing about the ribbons is that they're, even though we have these default ribbons, there's some more that comes up based on what you're on. In this workbook that we're looking at, I've got a drawing object and a chart. And when I click on these different objects, I'm going to get a context ribbon that pertains just directly to those objects. So let's try the drawing object first. Click on it. I got my drawing tools up here. I click the format ribbon. And now I've got all my shapes I could insert. I've got the styles. And as you work with Excel, and we'll look at this later, some of these commands and choices are so much better than they used to be in the old days. I mean, I can click this drop down and I have all these preset formats for my drawing object just at my fingertips. It's much easier than it used to be. Okay, get rid of that. And you just see some other, drawing related tools on this ribbon. If I click off it, my drawing tools ribbon will go away. And now I'll click on the chart object. And now here, instead of one, I got 3 ribbons that came up with this chart. Now the first one for the chart is going to be design, and here's where I'll see, I can change my chart type, switch columns and rows, do the layouts, can add a data table if I want. And then here's another neat thing in the design view. I can look at a big library and see what this chart is going to look like as I choose a format. And that's really, really helpful when you're designing things, to be able to see previews right as you're working. The next ribbon that it brought with charts is layout, and here's where I could change a lot of the nitty-gritty things, the data labels, legend, the axis, chart titles, etc. The last ribbon it brought up is format, and this is pretty much the same one as it brought up with the smiley face drawing object, because this chart is actually a drawing object as well, so we get a lot of commands that are basically related to the drawing object. You change the whole look and feel of it. So that's the context sensitive nature of it. Now a couple other things. One negative about the ribbons is they really tend to take up a lot of room on the screen. Well, luckily I found this pretty early on in working with them. You right click in the custom area, you can minimize that ribbon, and that way it'll only come up when you click on the tab. That's pretty similar to how menus work too, which saves you a lot of space on your screen. I'm going to go ahead and show it again as we need to see it. Now, one of the biggest, the ribbon was actually introduced in 2007, and one of the biggest drawbacks and complaints was that it wasn't customizable, and a lot of power users and programmers used to like to make our own menus and toolbars and kind of have them do things that were applicable to our application. In Excel 2007 you couldn't do that. Luckily for us, Microsoft heard the critique and they fixed it. 2010 you have the best of both worlds. We've got these really graphical feature rich ribbons, and we can edit them too. We can change them. So let's just see how to do that. It's pretty similar to how we used to. If I right click on any ribbon, I can go to customize the ribbon. And now over on the right hand side of the screen I've got all my ribbons, and I can add something to my home tab. And you see, one of the reasons I wanted to point out the groups is you see that the ribbons are actually organized by group. So let's say I wanted to add a new group. I could go down here, add a new grouping, and I'll rename it, and and that will allow me to put a name for that grouping in, and also choose an icon. I'm kind of partial to the smiley face, so we'll stick with that. Alright, now I can add a couple commands. Over on the left hand side of the screen, you see this drop down shows the commands by category. Here's the popular commands. You can also choose commands based on whatever ribbon you want to be on: macros, file tab, all tabs, main, tool tabs. Kind of fun to go to commands that aren't in any ribbon. So I'll click that. I'm going to scroll down. One of my favorites is select current region, so I'll add that. How about speak cells? Add that. And then we'll just add our spell checker to it just for demonstration purposes. And click OK there. And now you see at the end of my home ribbon, I've got a new group, Tom's Favorites. And I've got my 3 menu choices there. If I don't like where that is, I can right click, customize, and I can move that up, or I can just click and drag it to wherever I want it and click OK. And now it's my second group right there. So that's really, really nice. The select current region is pretty useful. It'll select the entire region of cells you're on if you're just on one. But again, being able to customize the ribbons is a really welcome addition in 2010. That about does it for ribbons. In other lessons we're going to go through a lot of the commands, but for now I just wanted to get you familiar with how they work and what they do. And again, I think that people who are used to the older version of Excel are going to have a tougher time, because we got to learn where things are now, where we were used to where everything is. But once you get used to it, I think you'll find it's a pretty neat interface.